Всем доброго времени суток, уважаемые дамы и господа. Сегодня мы продолжаем серию наших мастер-классов с нашими зарубежными коллегами, кинематографистами, топовыми преподавателями зарубежных школ. Вот, хотелось бы немножко вкратце обрисовать о школе, да, об индустрии. Именно основатель нашей школы является Федор Бондарчук, это продюсер кинокомпании «Водород» Михаил Врубель, Александр Андрющенко, а также партнером является национальная медиагруппа. Сейчас мы ведем набор активный по поступлению именно абитуриентов, студентов на очные, так и на онлайн-программы. Вот, поэтому всю информацию, которую вы хотите ознакомиться, можете посмотреть на нашем сайте и также связаться с приемной комиссией, в том числе и со мной. Меня зовут Евгений. Сегодня у нас будет достаточно очень массивная массивный спикер, да, которому действительно многие из нас обязаны за счастливое детство. Это мировой легендарный аниматор, который расскажет нам сегодня о создании магии персонажа Том Сито. Вот. Он принимал участие в таких мультфильмах, как «Король лев», «Русалочка», «Аладдин», «Красавица и чудовище» и многих других. Вот. Также он является профессором школы кинематографических искусств Университета Южной Калифорнии, президентом гильдии анимации Голливуда и почетный член правления Американской киноакадемии. Что касается регламента сегодняшней нашей встречи, она также продлится 1,5 часа, 1:15 у нас будет на само повествование и по 15 минут на вопросы. Поэтому не стесняйтесь, задавайте вопросы в чат, как и по мастер-классу, также и по обучению именно по школе мы ответим. Что касается дальнейших вопросов в школе, вы можете оставлять заявки, мы все, соответственно, вам расскажем. И, соответственно, хотелось бы на данный момент передать слово Тому. Том.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk at your school. I'm very honored to be here. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my career and about the art of animation as a career. And I figured the best way to do it is to do a little bit. I figured first thing I will do is start with my demo reel or my video reel. And it's funny nowadays because with computers, we have so many terms that are no longer relevant, they're obsolete. And when you say it's a video, it's not really a video, it's an electronic file. You know, just like when you say you filmed something, it's not film anymore. You know, it's not celluloid. It's it's digital. But anyway, so this is my sample reel that I would show people usually. So I'm going to go to screen share here, and we'll see if how this works out. Okay.
Vinca dal vino, calda la festa, una gran festa fa preparar. Se trovi in piazza qualche ragazza che con quella cerca menare.
Was that you?
Una vicina devi mentar, devi mentar, devi mentar, devi mentar.
Okay, so that's let me go back to this for a minute. So yeah, that's pretty much my work and all. The scene at the end is a scene from Osmosis Jones, which is a Warner Brothers movie done in 2001 that takes place in the human body, and it's about different sort of like cells or different little parts of the body or little people running around inside you. And I was using the actor William Shatner, who was Captain Kirk from Star Trek. And in that scene, the scene takes place inside your colon. And I said, Bill, in this scene, we're going to blow you out of Bill Murray's asshole. And he goes, oh, okay. Oh. And he had a lot of fun with it, which is good. The scene with the rabbit that makes a crap was actually done for a friend of mine who was a biologist. He's a professor in the biology department at the university where I teach, and he was doing an instructional film, and he asked me to help him. And one of the things that animation could do better than live action was he had to explain why rabbits eat their own crap. About like they have to eat it a second time. So, but seeing a real rabbit do that is a little gross. So we make it a cartoon. Meant to have some fun with it, you know. But anyway, I'm just going to start off here on my own. I have a little slideshow thing here that I will do. Let me do this. I'll go up here, and I'll go to this. Okay, so. Oh, let me close this. Okay. Oh, here we are. Let's see. View. Full screen. Okay. Okay. So let's do a little bit about me. This is how I started. This is me. And these are my grandparents, all who emigrated from Poland 100 years ago, before the First War. And very early on, when I was a young man, I wanted to make animation, and I wanted to be a cartoonist. And I went to school in New York, and then later in university. I had a chance. I was kind of fortunate that I began my career when a lot of the older artists, the golden age artists of Hollywood, were retiring. So as I started in 1975, a lot of artists were ending their careers. So I had a chance to sort of overlap with them and learn from them. So one of my mentors was this fellow named Seamus Culhane, who had worked for Walt Disney on Snow White and Pinocchio. And I always say the connection is too, he learned how to animate from Max Fleischer, and Max Fleischer learned to animate from James Stewart Blackton, who was one of the first American animators. And Blackton learned from Edward Muybridge, who was the great experimental artist, actually before movies in the 19th century. He was experimenting with motion. Sorry. But I was saying a lot of the golden age artists wanted to teach us all the things that they learned over their careers. And they wanted us to pass on to future generations the breakthroughs and the discoveries that they made in doing character animation. So I was fortunate that I was able to work with a lot of these people. And I see myself as a conduit or connection between that generation and the future generations. So the fellow on the left, Jack Ozark, was an old animator who used to do Popeye and Betty Boop and all. And he was a friend of mine. I learned a lot from him. And then I could pass it on to my students. So anyway, just talk a little bit about my professional life. The Richard Williams, and that's the Oscars for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, since I think this weekend is Oscar weekend. So at least here in Hollywood. So I first got my first break in 1976 as an assistant on this musical called Raggedy Ann. And I had a chance to work with a lot of famous animators on that. And that was a great opportunity. The film was not very successful, unfortunately, but I learned a lot from it. And it was great working with those great old artists. Then I moved out to Los Angeles, and I worked on a TV special that got an Emmy Award, which is the television version of an Oscar, you know. And I also did work at Hanna-Barbera for the characters called the Super Friends. So, you know, to do a lot of television programming. Then in the 80s, I was working on He-Man and She-Ra, you know, the Princess of Power. And that was a fun show. I was doing some animation, mostly storyboarding, and then eventually I was directing episodes on that show. This is like some of our storyboards that we would do originally, you know. And you know, and the storyboards is where you plan out the film and actually work out, you know, the various shots. And we were always trying. We were very conscious of the budget. So like, you know, we were trying to keep the costs down. So that's why we would recycle or reuse of older scenes, or use some standard scenes to, you know, to quickly, that would leave us budget to do the more complicated shots. Then at the end of the 80s, where I went to work in England again for Richard Williams on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And again, into some storyboarding as well as animating, and that was a great project and all, and it was a great breakthrough for me, and I had a chance to work in England for a while, which was nice. And one of the things that's fun is you get to work with famous old characters, and like these characters. Well, actually, the two on the left are famous. That's Sylvester and Woody Woodpecker. And the one on the right is just a sheep. We just put it in, so like, because just to fill out the crowd, you know. But it's fun to work in the older designs, because they're so well designed and all that. When you get to move them around, it feels good. It feels like you're a parking attendant and you get a sports car to park, and you're like, I like this. It moves well. And then later, this Roger doing one of his famous takes in one of the shorts in Tummy Trouble. So that's a little sketch of mine. So I was at Disney for 8 years, and worked on all the big pictures, and you know, had a great time working on just like 7 Oscar-winning movies. This is Jody Benson and Sam Wright. Jody Benson is the original English voice of The Little Mermaid, and Sam Wright was the original voice of Sebastian the Crab. Jody was saying, because she was mainly working in Broadway, and at the time she was a Broadway actress. At the time, the big successful animated movies hadn't really happened yet. Like Roger Rabbit was one of the first, and then Little Mermaid was the first big hit. And Jody said that when she got the job to do the voice of the Little Mermaid, her other actor friends called her up and they offered their condolences, like sympathy. Like, oh, you're doing cartoons, your career must be, going down, your career must be in trouble because you're doing cartoons. So, little did they know that it would become so successful. So I remember when we were working on the film, our head producer, Jeffrey Katzenberg, was saying, this film's going to make over 100 million. It's going to be the most successful film, this year. And we thought he was crazy. We thought, oh, animated films don't make that kind of money. The animated films, they do okay, but they don't, it's not like Steven Spielberg, like giant hits. You know, they just do okay. And then Little Mermaid was just a fabulous hit, and the next few movies just got bigger and bigger. You know, so yeah, I did Beauty and the Beast. On Beauty and the Beast, I did a lot of Beast and everything. So Glenn Keane was the main animator, but he gave me the funny scenes. So he said, Tom, you're the funny Beast, and I'll do the serious Beast. Okay. So that's the Beast eating his oatmeal, his porridge in the morning. So, and then on Aladdin, I did a lot of Genie, and Eric Goldberg was the lead animator on the Genie, but I did a lot of additional work as well, particularly on the second song. The Prince Ali, wondrous he, Ali Ababa, do, yeah, that one. So, and then on Lion King, I did which I was doing storyboards. I did I storyboarded out the Simba's song, the I'm gonna be a mighty king, so enemies beware. You know, that one. You know, so I just can't wait to be king, like that. So. And that was kind of fun. And you know, you work on a bunch of, it's all singing animals, you know. I mean, actually, when we were working on the film, part of the problem we had was when you think about what lions do, well, the original name of the film was called King of the Jungle. But then, like any movie, you do research. You do your research, you do your background, and you learn about the subject. And you know, we had a team go to Africa and study. And one of the things we found out was lions don't live in the jungle. They live in the grassland, you know, the savanna, they call it, you know, the hills, grassy, you know, area. But the classic concept of a jungle, no, they don't live there. And we were trying to think about, you know, we wanted them to be realistic, and we thought, well, what do lions do? It's like they sleep, make love, and kill things. And we said, okay, well, you can't show sleeping, that's boring. And you can't show making love because it's America, and we got a lot of censorship. So all we got left is killing things. Well, can he do it in a funny way? So there's a funny way of killing things. So it was trying to come up with things for the animals to do that look natural, but not being, you know, but still having a good time with it. And then I was working on Pocahontas later for Disney. I was the head of the story department on that one, you know, and that was a lot of fun as well. So then I left Disney after Pocahontas. Actually, I was on Fantasia for a little bit, and I went over to DreamWorks and worked on Shrek and the Prince of Egypt, and it was on that team for a long time. Some of the very early designs of Shrek, you know, when we were first creating him, just coming up, you know, you come up with little ideas, things for him to do, you know. Yeah, that was my team, the story team. It's interesting that if you look in the background, you'll see we're still drawing storyboards on paper and putting it on the wall. This is the system that Walt Disney created in 1925. So it's still the original system. Now everything is done digitally, but it took a long time to change over because everybody was so used to using the paper on the large boards. And you know, that's why in the States we call it a storyboard and not a storybook, because it's these big cork boards that you hang things up on. This is for Spirit, Stallion, and the Cimarron, which was the you know, we call it the horse picture. You know, we're doing the American West through the eyes of a horse, you know, and that was fun. That was a good one. Then I went over to Warner Brothers to do a film called Osmosis Jones, which I talked about at the beginning, about that inside your human body, inside your body is a city, and the city is, you know, and so it's a police murder mystery, except it's inside the body, and the police are the white blood cells, and, you know, and they're chasing germs and bacteria. You know, and so it was a fun project to work with. It was, you know, great fantasy. I was with the team. Again, that's with William Shatner, the Star Trek captain. When we were working over there. So a lot of movie stars like doing voice work because they don't have to get dressed up. It's like that, they don't have to get on makeup and get all fancy and worry about being in the public. They can just come in however they want, just casual, So a lot of them enjoy that when they can do that kind of work. And then, working with voice actors and all is part of the process just as much as drawing, because you have to get a performance out of your actors, and they have to create a character just with their voices, with no visual, because there's some actors that are very famous. I would think somebody like Tom Cruise, let's say, he's never done a voice for an animated film because he has a nice voice, but it's not really distinctive. It's just it's a nice voice, but he doesn't have like Sean Connery had a real voice. You go, oh, that's there's a lot to that. A lot of character in that voice. So you have to cast your actors to find interesting voices. And one of the problems you always have is you would get a celebrity, they would come in, and then they would want to do cartoon voices. So you get somebody you hired for their voice, and then they go, "Hi, everybody," and they start acting like silly. And you're like, "No, we don't want that. we want your voice. We don't want you doing an imitation of an old cartoon voice." So we would talk about that. Then I was also on a movie called The Looney Tunes Back in Action movie, which was a combination of live action and animation, where you work with the characters, you put the characters in a live action scene. Interesting thing is, this room really is one of the conference rooms that the heads of Warner Brothers work at. So they turned it into a set. But again, too, it's fun to work with famous old characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, which are things that I grew up on. So then I was president of of the animators trade union for 10 years, and I was a regular, working on that. And that has a long tradition in Hollywood too, because we have a lot of trade unionists, working in Hollywood, and especially with animation people, because there's so many people, you work so hard, and you want to make sure that people have a good living from it. And and lately too, we get into the whole idea that what with digital technology and with the computer, it's really kind of changed the nature and what we really understand to be animation. And you really have to start to think to yourself, well, what are we really saying when we're saying animation now? Because like when I first started in my career, it was pretty simple. There was animation and there was live action. And that's all. It's like you either worked on and animation was mostly for children. It was mostly children's work. But today with digital, animation is so everywhere. It's so the term like we would use is ubiquitous. It's so it's all encompassing. So many things are animation now. There's so much in movies. There's so much animation, and there's so much in commercials, and you what you get on your phone and your games. All these things. That's all animation now. This type work. This stuff, like the raccoon character from the Guardians of the Galaxy. He was animated just the same way like the Little Mermaid. It's the same principles. It's just that the rendering was different. So it really blended well with the live action. The animators who created the bear for the Revenant for this movie, before that we were working together on the Yogi Bear movie. So it's a very cartoony movie. So every movie is a new challenge. Some is very, very realistic, and some are just very silly. They're very cartoony. Like each one has its own challenge, which is fun. Because if you just did the same thing all the time, it would be boring. Now, the interesting thing too, I started writing early, and I like to write history. And I wrote a history of computer graphics in 2013. And because the thing I found so fascinating is as amazing as all the effects in movies now look like, it all started with this fellow, Ivan Sutherland. And in 1963, he wrote the first software for a computer to draw instead of numbers. And when you think about it, he's still alive. He just retired. So in 60 years, basically 58 years, we've gone from this tiny little window with these little simple lines to these big giant Hollywood spectacles, these enormous movies now. This is actually the very first digital drawing. It was done on a radar screen. There was a very early warning system that the government had where they adapted a radar screen and used it. It's actually the first computer screen in the States. And they had a little light pen for it. And this was discovered recently that some fellow late at night or something was bored, so he decided to do a drawing. So that's like the very first computer drawing in the US. So but yeah, so then we went from that to Jurassic Park and Toy Story and all these like enormous movies that are so popular now. And you know, Jurassic Park and Toy Story were like the two movies that really changed Hollywood. If you know the history of Hollywood movies, in 1928, when they made the film called The Jazz Singer, that was the first movie to make sound popular. And that's the movie where everybody went, oh, okay, movies should talk now. It shouldn't be silent movies. It should be talking movies. And Jurassic Park for live action and Toy Story for animation were the movies that decided computers would be the right way to make films. The way I tell my class is, before Jurassic Park, if you were on a movie and you told the producer, let's use computers, the producer would say, don't be ridiculous. I don't have time for that. After this movie, if you made a movie and you told the producer, let's not use computers, the producer would say, don't be ridiculous. we don't, we have a film to do. So that was the big change that happened in the 1990s. Everything shifted into digital at that point. And yeah, all this stuff that you see in films right now, like in the movie Gravity, it's all computer, it's all animation. It looks like live action, but it's all animated. In the movie Gravity, the only live action was really the actors' faces. Everything else was all done in computer graphics. The other thing animation was good for was early on was flight simulators, was and what they called industrial design, or using computers to design things before they're built. Because in the 1940s, when they used to do train pilots, what they would do is you get into this box that looked like a barrel or something that was on springs, and people on either side would shake it, and you would go, oh, I'm flying an airplane. But then when the technology went to jets and to supersonic jets and all, you couldn't do simulators like that anymore. You had to really train a pilot before you put them in an airplane, because it's dangerous, if they don't know what they're doing. So the simulators that were created used more and more advanced technology. So when a pilot turns his wheel, the landscape has to turn in real time to his movement, which in the 1960s was an incredibly complicated algorithm. It was a very difficult thing to do electronically. Now it's no problem, but that a lot of the early exploration into computer graphics went into things like simulators. This fellow here, Dr. James Blinn, did some beautiful work with the Voyager spacecraft. where, you know, they shot the Voyager spacecrafts into space in 1977, and they knew it would take several years to reach the outer planets. And NASA was worried, well, what if it gets there and the camera doesn't work? What if the camera breaks down? Or what if some sort of magnetic or gamma ray interference disturbs the transmission, and we don't get any we don't get any images? You know, everybody on Earth is going to go, what did you spend $3 billion on? You know, what's that thing doing up there? So they needed a simulation to explain exactly what the thing was doing. So Dr. Blinn went to the same school that Ed Catmull, Alvy Ray Smith, and a lot of the senior engineers of Pixar went to. They were all schoolmates together. And when Blinn was working on this, he actually hired some of the Pixar guys to work with him. You know, they were all just starting out. Pixar wasn't created yet, but he had these brilliant engineers working with him. And when you saw these simulators, it was amazing is that it looked so beautiful that you suddenly thought, well, if that's the satellite, who's got a camera? Like, who's actually looking at it? And it's like, no, it's Jim's simulation. Then, of course, the real photographs, the real film came back from Saturn and Jupiter, and they turned out to be perfect. And, you know, and so they actually didn't need the simulation anymore. But for a little while, the simulation was like extremely important. And that was another thing that kind of helped in the development of more natural computer graphics. The other thing they said they learned from doing these flybys was like one of the engineers told me, they thought, why should the camera be locked down? Like, why should it be a stationary camera filming them? Because everything's moving. The satellite's moving, the planet is moving, all the objects in orbit are moving. So why should the camera be stationary? Make the camera move as freely as the satellite. So the camera is like flying alongside the satellite. And then later on, these same engineers were doing visual effects for like movies like Star Trek and all. They used those principles and put those into their projects. So yeah, so then in recent years and all, I've been teaching more full time at USC. That's been a regular thing for me. And I've also written a number of books. And I think on the top one is the computer graphic one, and one for timing and all. One of the things I've done is that I've actually written a cookbook for animators, which sounds kind of crazy, a crazy idea. But many years ago, I got to be the assistant of an old animator named Grim Natwick. And Grim was the man who created Betty Boop. So he was the senior, he was the top animator doing the character Betty Boop. He also helped design Snow White for Walt Disney. And anyway, Grim was very proud of his chili recipe. He had a personal chili recipe. And I thought, oh, okay, well, you know, and so when I was done working with him, he gave me his chili recipe. And I thought, oh, I got Grim's chili recipe. And then I found out that Bill Hanna of Hanna-Barbera, he liked to cook for his crew. And then a friend in Japan said, Hayao Miyazaki has his own ramen recipe for ramen noodles. And he cooks ramen for his crew at night. And I got his recipe. And I got another recipe of Walt Disney's. And I told my publisher, I said, I could write a cookbook. Like, it's a crazy idea, but I just started calling animators and saying, do you have a favorite recipe? And a lot of them do, you know, especially in the digital age, I think, because I think when the world, when everything you do is so virtual, everything you're doing is you're working on a screen, and, you know, everything's all, you can't touch it. It's not tactile. You could only, you know, approximate working with it. I noticed that a number of these people, what their way of relaxing or their way of a hobby is they want to do something physical with their hands. Like a lot of programmers, computer programs I know, like to garden, or they like to, refinish antique furniture. And a lot of them like to cook. Suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I got a good recipe. I can give you a recipe. It's like, oh, okay, why not? So I just started collecting recipes, so. Now, where we go in the future, that's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like I said, it's only one lifetime to go from this fellow, to this stuff now. So where we're going to be in another 40 years, I don't know. I was talking with one computer pioneer once, and I said, so what do you think is the next thing to change? Like, what do you think will be the next big thing? And he says, what's the only thing in movies that hasn't changed in 100 years? I said, what? He goes, the screen. He goes, we're still looking at a big white sheet tacked up on the wall. Because maybe that's the next thing to go. I don't know. It'll be interesting. When I was starting out, one of my teachers was an old animator, and he said, everyone talks about old animation. Nobody talks about new animation. I said, well, okay, Howard, what is new animation? He goes, I don't know. I'm an old animator. That's your problem. And now that I'm an old animator, when I think about the future, I can say, that's your problem. You've got to figure it out. And I'm sure you will. So okay, I think that's enough of that one. If you like and everything, I could take some questions now. If you like, anybody have anything that they want to ask? I think you try to avoid ideas that aren't worthy of animation. The English director John Hallis once said, "Animation should begin where live action ends." And a lot of scripts sometimes they're just live action stories, just people talking, and you want to find something that's animatable, something that's interesting. Sometimes you could take a simple script and turn it into something funny by characters or whatever, but it's you want to find something that there's a lot of character in it and there's a lot of construction in it. The great thing about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that was like one of my favorite scripts to read. When I read it that night, the first night, I could already see the movie. Like I'd already see it happening. And like the film was already, was in my mind already. And working with the director, Robert Zemeckis, you felt that Zemeckis, the film was already finished in his head. Like he knew what he wanted to see. So you would ask him, you would tell him things like, Bob, how about this? Or, how about that? He'd say, I didn't see it that way. And okay, good. I like when a director knows what they want. It makes everybody's life easier. So, okay. I would say success in animation doesn't always go to the most talented. It doesn't always go to the best hustler, the most aggressive person. It goes to the stubborn. You just have to, don't take no for an answer. And because when a studio or project tells you no, it doesn't mean no forever. It means no this week. Next month, the whole thing can change. I would apply to studios, and they would show me around, and they didn't tell me that they were about to close and they were going out of business. They wouldn't say that. They would just give you the standard answer, like, well, work on your drawing, you'll get better. They won't say, they're coming to lock the door and kick us out. So, a studio like a studio does a movie and it's a big hit. They get excited, they want to do more movies, and they want to do more. A studio spends a lot of money and the film fails, then they don't want to do films anymore. Then suddenly the place closes. So studios rise and fall. So the first lesson is to be stubborn. The second lesson is don't lock yourself into one style. Try a lot of styles. Like you notice when you look at my films, you see a lot of different styles of artwork there. I learned that from Richard Williams, the British director. He said it's good to be like a chameleon. It's like I can do your style, I could do Disney style, I could do Warner Brothers style, because that makes you valuable. Because then you could work on anything. And like one day you might be on a drama, then the next day you're on a comedy, then you're on a fantasy. Some things are very simplistic, very cartoony. Some ones are very realistic. So you want to be able to do any of those things. That's one. And the third thing is you in your life, the animation community is very small. We all know each other. Internationally, I know a lot. The great thing about social media is I'm talking to animation friends in Dubai and Singapore and Taiwan and Paris and all, and we all work together. And now there's an international community. There's a global community. So people don't just stay in one city. You can work in other parts of the world. The most important, the three important things you need is you need one, experience. You need two, reputation. So if you have a good reputation as a hard worker or a very good artist, and then the money, but never lose the respect of your fellow artists. Because your fellow artists are going to be there when companies rise and fall. Like companies are like empires. They go up, they fall down, they're big, they're not, like just last month, Blue Sky closed, the studio that did Ice Age. They've been around for like 40 years. And it's sad to see it go, but that happens. Many of the studios that were very big when I moved to Hollywood are all gone. But I'm still working, and I'm still doing work, and you work with the same people. So no matter what project it is, So like Eric Goldberg and I, we worked together on the Raggedy Ann film. We worked together at Disney. We worked together at Warner Brothers. We worked together in England. We'll do a commercial together once in a while. It's just standard, And when you look at other famous you look at directors like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or Ron Howard, you'll see that they have what they call their posse. And that is the team that they trust. So they'll have the same editor, they'll have the same producer, they'll have the same composer, the same cinematographer, and they'll go from project to project together, as a team. Because they trust each other. A lot of them, even went to school together. When Brad Bird did a movie with at Pixar with John Lasseter, Brad and John went to school together. They were schoolmates. Just like when George Lucas graduated from USC, his screenwriter for Star Wars he went to school with, and his sound effects guy he went to school with. And his editor he went to school with. So you keep your friends close. Like no one job is worth losing the respect of your peers, of your friends, because they'll be there for you when the companies let you down. I've got more work from friends than I ever had, like officially applying to places and things. I was just chatting with somebody on Facebook, and he's like, "Are you working all right now?" I said, "No." And next thing I know, I got a job. I'm on a movie. I'm like, "Oh, okay." But that's how it works and everything. And people will say, people say, "Oh, you see, it's Hollywood, it's who you know." It's not really that. It's that a lot of these things are based on trust, and the filmmakers will say, I want to work with people I like working with. I want the working experience to be pleasurable. I don't want it to be awful. And then, if the movie is good or bad, that's great. But you want it takes so long to make animation. Like an animated feature film will be like a year, 2 years, whatever. Shrek was 6 years. So because it kept rewriting. Frozen Disney's Frozen was in production for a long time, for a number of years, because they would write a treatment, not like it, then they throw it out, write another one, not like it, throw it out. Finally, when whoever came up with the idea of Elsa and being sisters, then you're like, okay, that cracked the nut. You're like, okay, that was good. So that's one that but sometimes there are films that people work on for a long time, and for one reason or another never get made. The people spend, the studios will spend millions of dollars and then go, yeah. And that happens too. So it's that thing about keep good relations with a lot of people around you, your fellow artists and animators, because you're going to look out for one another, because you know each other, and when it counts, your friends will be there for you. Mm-hmm. Well, any kind of the interesting thing about animation is that animation is an industrialized art form. When animation began 100 years ago, it began as a small group of artists, to be like a few people. Like there were some people in St. Petersburg, there were some people in Paris, there were some people in London, there's some people in Japan, who were all experimenting with film, doing animated film. The reason why everything became Hollywood is because Hollywood took the process and industrialized it and turned it into a factory where you're cranking out films. So just the volume of movies was huge. And studios would go from a handful of artists, maybe 10 or 15 artists, to like 400, 1,000. It'd be these big things, and any kind of industrialized production line like that, where you have job specifications, because there was a fellow in 1913 named John Randolph Bray, and he basically created the job specifications for animator, because by studying Henry Ford's assembly line. So he said, okay, you're going to do the storyboard, you're going to paint the backgrounds, you're going to direct, you're going to shoot the camera, and he created the job classifications for everybody. Before that, an artist like Winsor McKay was doing everything himself. So creating the classifications enabled them to create, you could focus on one thing and do it really well. Like I have friends who love to animate effects. They don't want to do characters. They want to do lightning and laser blasts and explosions and everything. And that's okay. If that's what you want to do, you can make a good career at that. But any kind of job where you have a lot of people working for a weekly paycheck, you're going to run into problems. Because the owner of the company, is trying to show a profit. And and he's trying to keep costs down, but then at the same time, you want people to make a decent living. So the reason why industrial unions started in Hollywood in the 30s was because you had these large groups of workers who weren't being paid nearly enough, and so people have said, well, we want better benefits, we want a place to redress grievances, There's a story once that Walt Disney fired a man for telling a dirty joke. And, and it wasn't even directed at him. Walt was actually walking down the hallway, and as he passed by, these two guys were telling each other a dirty joke, and Walt fired the guy. The Disney studio for a while had a dress code for women. It wasn't until the year 1977 that women were allowed to wear jeans to work. You had to show up with a skirt all the time. If even if you wore like slacks or just like a dress, regular sort of like jacket and slacks, they would fire you on the spot. Just in the 1950s. And so the other thing was, there was a thing called the Disney Shuffle, which was the painters, who were mostly women, were on the floor above the animators, and they would while they were working on their projects, they would walk around very quickly, from one desk to another, carrying the animation acetate cells. And some of the artists complained that the clicking of their heels was distracting. So they heard the noise above their heads. So they actually ordered the painters to shuffle, to walk softly. That's the kind of like silly things people used to make you do. So or one supervisor would put his crew on extra hours at night because he had bet his friends a pack of cigarettes that they could finish the sequence, by Monday. That kind of thing. That was happening in the 30s and 40s. So that's one of the reasons and everything why they wound up forming unions. And and a good working relationship between management and labor. Ideally, if management is very nice to you, you don't need a union. But it's what is it in the Bible? There's a saying, I think, in the Old Testament: "Put not your faith in the word of princes." So, well, if you start with a tight idea, that's helpful. That works. When you design characters, designs like we like to say, characters breathe, which is mean the more you draw them again and again and again, and as you draw them, they change a little each time, and some of the details that you put in the beginning will drop off because they're not necessary. So if you look up like the earliest designs of Snow White or Pinocchio at Disney, it looks very different than the final, because there was that transition where you go through that design work. Same thing with Shrek, same thing with Frozen. The designs change as they go along. You have to plan for that. You have to allow for that development time. And sometimes you'll be developing a project, and you'll do a lot of work on it, and then you'll find out like, well, the studio doesn't want to use that character anymore, or the studio doesn't want to go in that direction. They want to change it, and you're like, oh, okay. Like when we were doing Pocahontas, we did a lot of research into the designs of what the English settlers' dwellings look like, their huts, like they built these little cabins or things. And some of the development artists did a lot of paintings of what these cabins would look like. And then from talking to the archaeological experts, the historians, they said that, well, at this point where Pocahontas and John Smith are together, the English didn't have any buildings yet. They were still living in tents on the beach. Like it was still like the only thing they did is put up a wall for defense, dirt wall and some stakes. in the ground, but they didn't have any dwellings. They didn't have any cabins or anything like that yet. So we had to throw all that artwork out, you know. And that happens, you know. In every Disney film, they always lose about maybe like 2 to 3 songs. There's always like a song or two, which they're actually pretty good. They're all good songs, but you just go, you know, it's taking too long or whatever. Like in Lion King, there was a song, and you know, this is Elton John and all the, you know, he wrote a song called "Mighty King of the Wild," and it's when Mufasa and Simba first come out on the ledge, and Simba's like, you know, Mufasa's like, Simba, this is all our land, but don't go over there. It's scary. Hyenas are there, you know, and it explains everything. And well, he had a song there, so we listened to this song and we're like, it's not that great. It's okay, but it's not that great. So we storyboarded it and we put everything up, and you know, draw like lots of panels, and, you know, because as a storyboard artist, it's not my job to be a music critic. You know, like when I hear a song, I can't just go to the director and go, hey, that song stinks. They'll just say, well, Tom, you mind your own business, do your job. And like, okay. So my job is to make the song work. So we did a lot of drawings. We put all the panels up. We brought in the directors and the producers and everybody, and they listened to it and they looked at the whole thing and they go, that song stinks. So they cut it, you know, and that happens. I mean, Mary Poppins, I think, has the record. I think there was like 6 songs they didn't use that were cut out of the film. Beauty and the Beast, I think, had 2 or 3. Aladdin had 3, you know, Proud of My Boy and Humiliate the Boy, you know. And what's interesting too about also was we used to have a rule with Disney musicals, and that was the last third of the movie, because, you know, everything's timed out, and the movie's only about 90 minutes. It's about 87 minutes, you know. When Brad Bird did The Incredibles at 2 hours, that was like, ooh, you know, that was a big deal, because the normal rate is we go by the Snow White length, which is 87 minutes. So when we were doing Pocahontas, the music team of Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, they really wanted to do a love duet at the end. They wanted John Smith and Pocahontas to sing to one another, you know, goodbye, you know, like that, like an opera, you know, oh, goodbye forever, goodbye, you know. They didn't want them to sing, and they wrote this beautiful song called "If I Never Knew You," you know, and it's a really nice song. And you listen to it, you're like, yeah, it's very beautiful. So we storyboarded the whole thing and all, and then when we showed it to an audience, generally the last third of a Disney musical doesn't have music, because the audience just wants to finish the story. They want to know what happens. So except for like a fight song, like, yeah, get him, you know, kill the beast, you know, that's the one song at the end. But otherwise they don't have that. So when we ran it for an audience, people started, as soon as they heard the tinkling in the piano, like here comes a song, you could hear people groaning, people going, oh, you know. And Alan Menken, who's like the chief composer, stood up and looked at us and said, we got to cut that song. You know, and that happens, you know, that's part of the process, you know. There's a phrase that you have in movies called "kill your children." Like, and what "kill your children" is you can't get attached to something because it's yours. If it doesn't work for the film, it's out. And you know, and you can't feel bad about it. You know, you can't have an ego about it. You have to just say, okay, because the only work of art that counts is the film. The finished film, that's the work of art. Everything else is process. You know, all this, you know, drawings and sketches and all this kind of stuff. That's all process. But the finished film, that's the work of art that counts. Let's see. Well, You know, nowadays with digital and all, the processes of animation and live action of filmmaking are pretty close, and you know, it's still the same kind of shots and all. This thing's good. This one's good. Directing shot by shot. That's a pretty nice one. And this one too, the 5 C's of cinematography. That's a famous one. And you know, it's really aimed towards live action, but it works for animation as well. The thing about directing is that, and it's actually a harder transition than you think, because directing has nothing to do with your ability to draw or your ability to animate. It's your ability to inspire and motivate a team of 5 to 500 people with your personality alone. So you have to be like a leader and everything, you know, because things aren't going to be done the way you would physically do it, but you have to trust them. Like the best advice I got when I was directing was an older director told me, he says, trust your crew. He says, the most important decision you're going to make is choosing your crew. Choose people you trust and choose people you know won't let you down, and then let them do it. You know, one of the reasons why Ron Howard is such a well-respected director in Hollywood is Ron hires really good people to work for him, and he lets them do their job, and he's almost like the head of a board of directors. You know, like he'll volunteer his opinion when it's asked for. He'll say, okay, let's change that, or let's fix this. But generally, he lets people do what they do best, and that's opposed to some other directors like James Cameron wants to do a lot of things. So he's like storyboarding, and he's looking in the camera, and he's talking to the cinematographer, and he's got his hands on a lot of things. It's a different style of direction. But a lot of people enjoy working with Ron, and you know, and his movies are very successful. So obviously something he's doing is working. So an interesting question. I think Art Babbitt, who was one of the great old animation artists, he created Goofy for Walt Disney. You know, he said the cinema is your research library. So study other films. Ken Anderson, who was one of the great old Disney development artists, you know, he did a lot of early designs and development. He had a practice. He taught us. He says, whenever I see a film, whenever there's a film I like, he says, I see a film I like. He says, I watch it 3 times. He says, the first time I watch it is to get the story over with. It's like, okay, I know the story now. Then I watch it again, and I just watch cutting. I watch how it cuts. Then I watch it again, and I watch light. I say, you know, how is it lit? You know, what, you know, and when something really moves you, when you see something you really like, take it apart. Say, why do I like this? You know, what is, you know, what's working here that I enjoy? Akira Kurosawa, the great Japanese director, taught himself filmmaking by getting a print of a John Wayne Western. There was a John Ford Western called Stagecoach. And he just took this 5-minute sequence of when the Indians attacked the stagecoach. And it's an exciting like chase with a lot of shooting and all. And it's a 5-minute piece. And Kurosawa said he watched it 50 times. He kept running it back and forth. He kept running it back and forth and kept studying it and seeing the shots in relation to one another. He actually timed them. He actually got a stopwatch, and he timed, you know, the cuts to see how it cut together. So you know, that's like the best way to kind of teach yourself, and you know, and it's okay to piggyback off someone else's style. You know, if you're starting out, like Ridley Scott. When he started, Ridley Scott was an art director first, He does his own storyboards. They're actually pretty good. But Ridley started as an art director, and then he directed commercials, and then he went from commercials to doing film. But he was very influenced by Stanley Kubrick. Like, he loved Barry Lyndon, and he loved what Kubrick was doing with light in Barry Lyndon, that he was using natural light instead of artificial light. So it's, so you can work in someone else's style until you find your own style. Like early Beethoven sounded like Haydn because it was his pupil, and then the full mature sound of Beethoven came out. And that's normal. And you never really stop learning. You're always getting something from every project. I mean, it's kind of interesting because you'll see some directors who deliberately try to challenge themselves. They'll say, okay, if I'm doing serious stuff, I'll do something very funny right now. Or if I'm doing nothing but comedy, I'll do something, tragic. And then you have somebody like James Cameron, where James Cameron does his one thing. He does those action fantasy spectacles, like those big fantasy movies with the science fiction characters. You don't see him doing Shakespeare. you don't see him do Chekhov or something like that, or something, Jane Austen or something. He does his genre, and he's good at it. So okay, that's his choice as a filmmaker. Well, I think sometimes it's all, the medium too is that, is if your script is going to be for the cinema, or it's going to be a broadcast medium like television. Because if you watch programs like The Simpsons or Family Guy or the television shows, they have a different strategy to theatrical films. So theatrical films, you still use a lot of pantomime and a lot of physical action. So like a dog with something stuck on his butt, trying to get it off. A lot of animation to create that. In the television shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy and all, it's all dialogue, because it's replacement mouths. Characters are. So they put all their money in the writing and the soundtrack, so they get very strong dialogue. Chuck Jones used to say about The Simpsons, he used to say it's very good radio, meaning that you'll turn off the picture and you're still going to laugh. It's still funny because it's in the writing. So you have to decide, if it's a continuing show, like you're going to be doing episode after episode after episode, then you want to think of something that doesn't have a lot of physical action, but it's more the witty exchange between characters. That's the entertainment. If it's a cinematic film, something you're going to see on a large screen, then you want to something they used to say at Disney was, take me someplace I've never been before. So show me something I haven't seen before. Like one of the things that's great about Zhang Yimou, the Chinese director, with the stories that he would do about those warriors and all, was that he takes us to medieval China. So we see this medieval China happening. Or Tom Moore, the guy who does the Book of Kells, and now he has Wolf Walkers out. His stuff is very Celtic. It's very Irish. Whatever's this Irish that him. The way Miyazaki's Japanese and he's Irish. So you could do Russian stuff. You can animate Believe It or something. Global audiences enjoy going to places they haven't been before and seeing things. So that would be the kind of things that if I was looking for a larger screen. The thing about fairy tales and all is that a lot of fairy tales, just like Shakespeare and all, or Chekhov, will have universal themes. that are relevant no matter what you do to them. Like the reason why people like Shakespeare so much is you could do anything to Shakespeare and it stays Shakespeare. You know, you could put Shakespeare in outer space. You could put Shakespeare in the ghetto, you know, in the hood in Los Angeles. You know, you could put Shakespeare underwater. It's gonna stay Shakespeare. I mean, Lion King is Hamlet. Lion King was always Hamlet, and Pocahontas was Romeo and Juliet. You know, so the themes involved are always relevant. You know, you're always going to have young people rebelling and falling in love. You know, and you're always going to have ambitious, you know, folks trying to overthrow a king. You know, so so those are like sort of general themes that they could look for. But if you're doing a TV series, you want to create a strong ensemble, which is like you want to have like about 4 or 5 characters that are very interesting. Like you have your main character, you know, your 2 lead characters, but then the other characters around them have to be interesting, and because then you could write episodes, you know, as the weeks go by, you could write an episode focused on one character, you know, and then another character, and then that would all work. You know, so all these things all have you know, value when you're evaluating a script. Oh, I should ask before you do another question. One thing we found out when we were doing Prince of Egypt is that do you ever wonder why in cartoons it's always funny animals? It's always anthropomorphized, or it's always like animals acting like human beings. That's an ancient tradition. Actually, goes back to the Greeks. You know, I think there's a Japanese scroll of rabbits and monkeys and little animals acting like human beings from the 12th century. You know, so this idea of all of us wanting to give human intelligence to animals is an ancient idea. But one of the things too about using animals is animals don't have a cultural bias. You know, when you do a movie that just has human beings in it, people will say, well, that doesn't look like me, or that's not my life, or, you know, okay, the Americans do that, but I don't do that, you know, or whatever the reason is. Like when we were doing Prince of Egypt, we tried very hard to be faithful to the Old Testament, to the Bible, and we have religious scholars that were Christians, that were Jews, that were Muslim, you know, all giving us advice. And there were still religious groups that hated the film because it wasn't exactly the way they saw their you know, their version of the Moses story, parting the Red Sea and all. But when you use animals, people drop their prejudgments of the characters, and they drop their cultural bias, and they just enjoy them as animals. So, you know, you think of the films that were very successful globally, Lion King, okay, you know, Ice Age, you know, and ones that are just purely just animals having fun. You know, people seem to gravitate toward, they enjoy that more, you know. But again, you know, because the audience is becoming so international now, you know, you're very aware of what the rest of the world looks like. You know, like how the rest of the world is seeing your characters. So, like somebody was saying about when Disney did the film Moana, when they ran it in Italy, they had to change the name of Moana, because apparently in Italy, Moana is the name of like one of their top porn stars. So can't have Disney film named for a porn star. So that's a good question. Yeah. It's hard to see. Yeah, because it's the 2D world's been in retreat for a long time. You know, with all the 3D stuff. I'm kind of hoping that 2D doesn't completely die off, because there are things that you could do in 2D that you can't do in 3D. You know, just like there are things, you know, you could do in 3D that you can't do in 2D. But so I think they're different things. Like, Glenn Keane said, photography didn't eliminate painting. People didn't stop doing paintings because there's photographs. They're different. Television didn't eliminate radio. At one point, radio was everywhere. Everybody was on a radio, and then television came in, and then radio had to reevaluate its strengths. Like, what is good about radio? And one of the things they figured out was that the old time radio, when there was no television, was they would have these big variety shows where they'd have singers and comedians and they'd read plays and they do all this kind of stuff. And that all went to television. So they said, well, what is special with radio? Radio is a conversation between me and you. It's like the man at the microphone is speaking in your ear and you're hearing them. So they play to that strength. They say an interview or a discussion between two people is a better show than trying to compete with television with big musical, spectacles. So I think 2D's got to do the same thing. Like what works in 2D. Ollie Johnston, one of the great old men, used to say, 2D has graphic cheats. There's things that you could get away with in 2D, like smearing drawings and foreshortening things, this kind of thing that look better in 2D than 3D. So it's finding those things that succeed. I think it's I've been in animation 45 years now, and I've seen cycles. I've seen where at one point everything gets very natural, then it goes very graphic, then it goes very natural again, realistic, then it goes graphic again. And there's things that are in vogue where suddenly, okay, this is the latest thing that everybody wants to do. And then like they were saying in Hollywood, there's conventional wisdom until somebody proves you wrong. Like before Pirates of the Caribbean, you couldn't get arrested with a pirate script. If you went to a studio and you said, oh, I got this great idea for a movie, pirates. They're like, get out of here. Nobody likes pirates. Nobody cares about that. Then Pirates of the Caribbean, big hit. Suddenly, like, okay, pirate movies, it's pirates everywhere. Just like when Ridley Scott did Gladiator, before he did Gladiator, movies about Greeks and Romans. In Hollywood, they call that a sword and sandal film. So swords and sandals. So they weren't going anywhere. Then Gladiator was a big hit. So here's 300, there's Spartacus, there's there's all these movies suddenly about Greeks and Romans. Now zombies are big, a lot of zombies movies and things. So there's a trend and then it changes. So I'm hoping there'll be a swing back towards 2D. One thing I find interesting is a lot of my students and a lot of students internationally are more interested in learning 2D than 3D. Because I was talking with some friends at the Gobelin School in Paris, and they're like, yeah, our students want to do 2D. Like, interesting. So maybe you guys are the ones that are going to bring it back. Yeah, we should probably wrap it up. Yeah, so I think if you create a dynamic situation and all, you want something that's exciting. Cinema is about moments. It's not so much about the writing. I mean, in the writing, but cinema needs a big moment. Like in the first Star Wars movie, the very first Star Wars movie, the first time you sat down and you saw the giant spaceship going over your head, as it was attacking the little ship. That was like a very big moment, like now it's a cliche. Everybody's seen it. It's like you've seen it 100 times, so it's no big deal. But that was the first time anybody had seen it. So that was very exciting. Just like, if you do a story like the American novel Moby Dick about the guy chasing the whale. And I mean, when you think about Moby Dick, you don't think about the dialogue. You don't think, oh, call me Ishmael. One day I get tired of living in a town, so I took myself down to the sea. That's it's nice writing. But what people remember is they remember the whale and the guy on the back of the whale with the harpoon hitting him, and that's the exciting part. That's the part you remember. That's the big one. So you want to look for in your script those big moments. Like, what is going to be the moment that you're going to go, oh, that's that's a big deal, and because that's what the audience is going to come away with. That's the thing that they're going to enjoy, and everything. When even when they go home and they see it again, they watch it again. They're going to look forward to those moments. So, okay, all right. Well, I think we're done now, huh?
Том, спасибо большое. Это было очень познавательно, очень круто прикоснуться, конечно, к великому. И спасибо большое Сэму за перевод. Хотелось бы всех поблагодарить также за присутствие на нашем мастер-классе. Всех, кто досмотрел до конца, ждет небольшой подарок от нашей школы. Это 10% скидка на первый семестр обучения по любой программе. Вот. Этот мастер-класс был предпоследний. На следующую пятницу у нас будет заключительный мастер-класс, поэтому всех приглашаю также присоединиться. Вот. И всем до скорой встречи. Ждем вас в индустрии.